Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're just waiting for Councillor Mancini and Councillor Austin, so we'll probably start in about 5 minutes. So it'll be 5 minutes delayed. Thank you.
Ready to go, Madam Clerk? Good afternoon. My apologies, everyone. Thanks very much for attending the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee. It is August the 1st, and it's 1:05, so we're a few minutes late, and I take full responsibility for that late start. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Mi'kmaq people, and here in Nova Scotia, and particularly HRM, we consider ourselves all to be treaty people. The approval of the minutes from June the 13th, so I have a call for those minutes being approved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Lovelace. All those in favour of those minutes? We now have official minutes. Thank you. The approval of order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, are there any additions or deletions?
No additions or deletions have been received by the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor? So moved, thank you. Second? By Councillor Austin. We now have an official agenda. Thank you very much. Business arising out of the minutes, seeing none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none. And when it comes to motions of reconsideration, motions of rescission, consideration to defer to business, notice of table matters, all none. And now we have 10.1 correspondence. Madam Clerk, are there any correspondence or petitions?
No correspondence or petitions have been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Any petitions from the committee? Seeing none. We do have a couple of presentations today, and so we're looking forward to that. The first one up is 10.3.1. Lacey Sutherland, the Lung NSPI Radon Awareness. So if you'd like to come forward, oh, there you are, hiding in the back there. You have a presentation, I believe, a slide deck. Do you have that queued up?
Is it working? Okay, thank you.
Well, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. We look forward to your presentation. If you could introduce yourself, your organization, and you'll have 10 minutes, and our lovely clerk will give you a heads up when your time is always up, and the floor is all yours.
Great, thank you. So my name is Lacey Sutherland. I am the programs manager at Lung NSPEI. I've been with Lung now for just over 3 years. We are a leading health charity in Atlantic Canada. We're dedicated to improving quality of life by preventing and managing lung disease through advocacy, patient services, education, and research. Today, I'm here to talk to you guys about radon awareness, what it is, and how to protect our lung health. So radon is an invisible radioactive gas that's odorless, colorless, and tasteless. It's caused by the breakdown of uranium in the soil, rock, and water, and it seeps into homes undetected. And the only way we can know the level of radon in our home is to test for it. And there's no radon-free homes. So how this enters a home. So any home, old or new, through cracks in the floor, walls, foundations, spaces around pipes, anywhere a home contacts the soil, it gets drawn into a home through negative pressure. In the outdoor air, radon gas dilutes and does not pose a health risk, but in closed spaces such as a home, it can build up to high concentrations that become a health risk. Even in new homes where they are becoming more tight, we're actually finding higher levels because radon can get in, but it can't get back out, right? So I thought this was a great opportunity to talk about this as we do look to create a more energy efficient home, which oftentimes means sealing up those homes to be more airtight. So why am I speaking to you about this today? Long-term exposure to high levels of radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in Canada, and it's a leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. It's estimated that about 30% of radon-induced lung cancers are non-smokers, and it's an estimated about 3,000 Canadians die each year from radon-induced lung cancer. And in Nova Scotia and across Atlantic Canada, we have the 4th highest average radon levels in the world. Canada has some of the highest ones, except for Poland. We do have quite a significant risk here. It's estimated about 1 in 4 homes in Atlantic Canada that have radon levels above Health Canada guidelines that have tested. So I just pulled a couple of stats from the Nova Scotia radon map just to kind of show the prevalence. And this is only homes that have been tested and added to this map. So there's definitely more homes than this that are at high risk. And that actually includes Halifax. Halifax HRM has several high-risk areas, including Tantallon, Timberlea, all these areas right here in downtown Halifax as well. But across Nova Scotia, this is an issue. So how do we test a home for radon? It's simple and relatively inexpensive. DIY test kits are available at provincial lung associations across Canada, and they typically range for $50 to $70, or you can hire someone to professionally measure your home as well. They use the same test, but they just go into the home and place it themselves. and it should be done using CNRPP certified long-term radon detectors for a minimum of 91 days. And the reason you need to do a long-term test is because radon levels peak and flow. So, you know, temperature, wind, all these things impact how much radon could come into your home because it's sucked in by negative pressure. So you need that long-term average to make sure you're testing your home accurately, and we're not making a decision around remediation on like a false negative, for example. There is a solution. Radon, the most effective way to reduce radon is installing an active soil depressurization system. This is typically ranging between $1,500 and $3,000, and Health Canada recommends taking action within 2 years for a home between 200 becquerels and 600 becquerels, or for 1 year for a home for above 600 becquerels. So that threshold is to stay under 200 is Health Canada's safe level of radon in a home. However, this cost is quite significant for many people. We know times can be tough lately, so even that $50 I mentioned before for testing can be a challenge for some people, and that $1,500 to $3,000, depending on what needs to be done to a home, is very significant. So that's why some of our programming that we've done that I would like to talk about very briefly. One is our Radon Reduction Grant Program that we just launched in May with the support of the province. So we offer free radon test kits to low-income homes across Nova Scotia. And then we also provide radon mitigation grants up to $2,500 for, again, low to middle-income households as well, to help people test their homes without having that fear that they would not be able to afford to take action and fix that solution, because of course radon-induced lung cancer is a significant concern. So if someone does find high levels in their home and they can't do anything, that's a significant barrier from someone taking action and even testing, because sometimes not knowing is just more peace of mind. So we want to reduce those barriers and have more people test, have more people mitigate their home. Other ways that we're raising awareness is through the library radon test kit loan program. So you can loan out a short-term radon test kit from your local library across Nova Scotia. This is a screening and awareness program, and it does not, it should not be done over long-term testing, but it's a way to bring more awareness. Nova Scotia was the first to launch this program, and since then it's spread out across the country. We also partnered with MLAs across the region to offer these same loan kits to offer more additional spaces to access them. We created a mandatory radon awareness course for real estate agents. We did a daycare radon testing pilot project back in 2020 because, again, kids are spending significant hours of a day at daycare, and it's a long-term lifetime exposure. So we wanted to bring awareness in this setting as well. And we also hosted a workshop that brought stakeholders together across the Atlantic region to discuss radon and how we can all act together. And out of that came the Atlantic Radon Working Group as well. So that's a way to continue these conversations across the region. So that's just a couple of things that we have done for radon awareness. And I just wanted to chat about ways for you guys to think about how we can all spread radon awareness across the region. One would be to test all HRM buildings for radon and remediate if necessary. We can all be leaders in this, lead by example, to test our homes and buildings and workspaces for radon. We all spend significant hours every day throughout the week at our work, right? Participate in Radon Action Month, which is November, promoting awareness. Our organization along with others, as well as Health Canada, really do a strong push in November to build awareness and encourage people to test their homes. And support increasing awareness amongst key stakeholders, such as people who work in trades who are going into these homes, who are building homes, so that we can protect Nova Scotians for radon awareness, try and prevent radon-induced lung cancer as best that we can. And that's all I have today. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to you all. And if you have any questions, I'm here.
Lacey, thank you very much. A very interesting presentation. There are some of the committee members who would like to ask some questions. So first of all, Councillor Lovelace, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Lacey. Lacey and I met a few months ago, and we had this conversation, and I thought, hey, we should know a little bit more about this. This is incredible work that you're doing, great presentation. I love the fact that there's a mandatory real estate awareness and educational course. It's also, I think, really important for home inspectors to learn more about that, so I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the home inspectors. And also, while HRM looks internally at our buildings, which is an excellent point, especially those that have summer programs for children. I'm wondering what Lung NSPEI is doing with school boards to raise awareness with school boards. I'll just ask, I'll be with you just one sec, and I'll finish up and let you answer the questions. And my other question is, I get asked whether or not radon tests can be reused. So, for example, if a family they buy that radon test, can they then give it to their cousin or family member and continue to use that? So again, thanks so much for being here, and I appreciate this opportunity to have this presentation and continue to work with your organization.
Okay, there you go. Okay, I'm going to start with home inspectors. So absolutely, this is a target audience that we do chat about of how do we reach them. They're very important. Already in building codes, it is required to put in a rough-in system. So that's really just a pipe and a stub cap. So it makes it easier should you have high radon levels to install that. Challenge is there's not always the proper placement of it in a home. So sometimes it's inaccessible when someone places it in. So it is an area that us and a bunch of stakeholders across the region do want to reach. I have heard discussions that in the new building codes, which I believe Halifax and Nova Scotia adopts, they're updating it to include a passive mitigation system within it. So that's basically all that piping that goes out, but it just doesn't have the fan. So that is a very good improvement to protect people in Nova Scotia. However, that only covers new homes, not all those older homes, which many of us live in. So I think education is an important piece, and there's lots of stakeholders such as Health Canada who can really support that education. Other organizations like CARS, like ourselves, are happy to be involved in that to help support bringing that awareness. Having opportunities like this helps build those connections. Schools. All Nova Scotia schools have already been tested and remediated, so the province has really taken a great lead on that. So that's already been done and has been in place for many years. So that's good.
Great.
I'm going to say next was the sharing of radon tests.
Yes, sorry, the reuse of the test.
Reuse of the tests. So those tests are a one and done. They're not shareable. So after you basically, the device, it looks like a little puck. So it comes vacuum sealed. Once you open it, it activates. So it's testing the air. In a nutshell, there is basically a film inside of it. Radon has alpha particles. That's what causes the cancer when they go down into your lungs. So those alpha particles come into that device and they make little dents into it. Then you send out that detector to the lab for analysis. You put it in a Ziploc baggie so it stops testing that outdoor air. And then the lab takes that, analyzes it, and determines based on how long you tested your home what the concentration of radon is. So it's not reusable. It gets sent to the lab. That lab gives you your results directly.
Oh, that was an excellent explanation. Thank you. Thank you. No, you're good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What else was impressive, she remembered all your questions. She never wrote one of them down, I noticed, and she didn't forget. So I looked at our wonderful staff in here that were always writing down the 20 questions that we give in 5 minutes. Very well. Well done, Lacey. Good job. Councillor Austin, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You already answered the main question I had, which was regarding building code and how do you prevent risk in new buildings, and it sounds like that is at least coming when the province finally proclaims the changes to the building code, hopefully soon. I was wondering if you had any info, do you happen to know, like where we talked about schools all have been tested, do we know, has the province done this in public housing, for all the public housing in the province?
I'm not 100% sure on that answer. I know like all like the provincial buildings themselves have also been tested, and they have a whole program around testing and remediation, but I'm not 100% sure around public housing.
Okay, that's something I will take away and ask about. That was just my last question. I'll just say I appreciate all the work, and while we're here, I've signed out a loan from the library because it's been on my to-do list to look at my own house, and it's kind of one of those things you always it's easy to put aside and forget about. So you at least prompted me to go check my own home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Lacey, for being here today and explaining this to us so clearly. I'm just wondering if you have anything you could add about the distribution of radon in HRM, because my understanding was certain types of geology make it more prevalent than other types of geology, and we have quite a variety of types of geology across the municipality. So I'm just wondering if you could make that connection for us, because if you know a little bit about granite and that sort of thing, and your community isn't on granite, then that would alleviate some worries, I would think.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Like I had said before, there's a lot of factors that go into the radon levels of a home, a lot around how airtight your home is, the type of foundation you have, if you have like an HVAC system, all that kind of thing. But it shouldn't just be, oh, it looks like if you go on the radon map, I'm in a low risk area. All homes have radon, and there's other factors there was a story in New Brunswick, actually, someone who did have radon-induced lung cancer. All their neighbors were safe and they didn't test high, but this person, for their foundation, when they're building their home, they trucked in all this gravel and whatnot, right? So you can't depend, oh, I'm in a low risk area, right? So all homes have radon. Everyone should test. It's simple. It's relatively inexpensive. We've created programs to help those who may not be able to afford it. Why take that risk?
Okay, thank you. It hadn't really crossed my mind that even a small, trucking in of some gravel could have that much of an impact. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Seeing no more folks on the list, I have a few questions. Colleagues, you don't mind me if I ask them from here. Again, thank you, Lacey, for the presentation. So I actually have a question for Mr. McPherson, who is our Director of Property right here. Do we have a strategy for testing our buildings when it comes to radon?
Thanks for the question. We build the new buildings to the building code. But I'll certainly take this as an opportunity to take it away and look at a program for ours. Yeah, it'd be great if we get some feedback on what you're doing on that, John, for our new buildings, all of our buildings, right? And considering we have not only our own employees in it, but a lot of the public. But thanks very much. So right off the bat, I think that's a great big plus, Lacey, that you brought to the table. What about other jurisdictions when it comes to building codes? Across the country, do certain provinces, or is it from a national level? I know that we're looking at the building code here, which is a little angst around that and getting some decisions from the province on that, but are the checking radon or what was the device you talking about, the depressurizing system, included as part of the building codes? Any jurisdictions have that?
So the National Building Code is the one that's looking to update into the passive one. That's from my understanding. I know it has not been done yet, but there has been significant discussions around it. And whatever, obviously provinces and municipalities can choose whether or not to use that National Building Code, but that's a really great standard that they're updating, and that's the one that I would defer to.
Great. And my last piece, Lacey, there's 16 of us in council. We all do monthly newsletters and things of that sort. If you wanted to share with us some of the graphics that you maybe showed with us and the awareness of about radon, where you can get the tests and all that kind of thing. If anything you want to put together and share it with us, we can share with our colleagues. I'm sure most of us would be happy to include that in our newsletters on a regular basis.
Yeah, I have oodles of stuff that I can share. Where is the best place to share with all that information with?
Yeah, you can reach out You can even reach out to me, and we'll connect you with one of our coordinators, and we have someone on staff that takes care of all of that and helps us with our newsletter. So if you want to reach out with me, I can make that connection for you, and that'd be great.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. Oh, Councillor Lovelace will ask something. Go ahead, Councillor. Yeah, go ahead.
One quick question, which I think is really important, Lacey, is how the municipality works with your organization, as well as Health Canada and the province with Dr. Strang's working group. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about that, because that's a great opportunity for us to make sure we're all on the same page.
About the working group in general?
For radon, yeah.
Yeah, so there is a Nova Scotia Radon working group. So we have stakeholders such as ourselves from the province, Health Canada, and as of now, actually the HRM has just joined and will be joining us for our next meeting in September. We meet 3 to 4 times a year, and it just is a way for us to look at actionable items where we can all come together. A lot of it is around promotion and awareness, as well as internal actions that we can take, like creating meetings with like home inspectors. We work, bringing in thoracic surgeons who are part of this as well, how we can just spread this information and encourage Nova Scotians to be more radon aware. Nova Scotia honestly has been a leader in radon awareness and action for the past decade. Lots of opportunities that we create here have rolled out across Canada. So we have been doing great as a leader. I just would like us to continue to be that leader, and having HRM be part of that, such as, looking at opportunities to, test your own buildings, participate in the working group, is really great ways. The working group has kind of been back in action, I'd say, for 1.5 years. Don't totally quote me on that. Time flies. It did take a pause during COVID, of course.
But yeah, so it's a great opportunity for us to be able to now have a seat at that table, ensure we have the communications from that. And I believe it's someone from Planning and Development that is on that working group. So thank you, Lacey. Great opportunities.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Lacey. Thank you very much for the presentation. Well done. We have another presentation. This is 10.3.2. This is the Bird-Friendly Halifax, and I believe we have Jess here with us and Amy. Come forward. Thank you. Welcome. While you're setting up your slide deck, I had the good fortune of spending a morning in beautiful Shuby Park watching for birds, and now I drive my family crazy with my app that they showed me on that day, and I go, wait, I know what that is, and now I'm starting to recognize the bird, which is a little scary too, I think, but I had a great day and met both these lovely people, so they wanted to come to present to the committee, and I think there's will generate a lot of information and questions. So thank you to both of you. Welcome. Welcome very much. And the clerk will let you know when your time is about up. You do have your slide deck ready to go, do you? All right. Well, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a wonderful event. Thank you for coming. So my name is Jess Lewis. I'm the intern director with Nature Nova Scotia, and I'm also the chair of Bird Friendly Halifax. I have Dr. Amy Moy with me. She's an environmental science prof at Dalhousie University, and she studies declining species in urban and disturbed habitats. As the slide says, I'm going to be talking about Bird Friendly Halifax, but first things first, I want to give a thanks for Councillor Mancini for coming out to our Bird Walks event. A special thank you to Catherine Morris, who stands on the Bird Friendly Halifax Coalition, as well as HRM as a whole for supporting our organization by having a staff representative on our coalition. So, as a quick review, Bird Friendly Cities is a certification program with Nature Canada. We became an official Bird Friendly City in 2022 when the Municipal Council passed a motion to support this program and its requirements. So we've been very busy since then, but I do kind of want to introduce the coalition. You can see all the different logos here. So we're a group of like-minded environmental professionals as well as citizen scientists who meet monthly to chat about birds. It's also kind of a point of pride that we are currently the only bird-friendly city in Atlantic Canada. So, that is a point of pride, but it's also a little concerning because there should be other cities. And yeah, like I said, we meet monthly. We're always looking for new members. If anybody would like to join, that's an option. I want to talk about our current initiatives. So we have the Halifax Bird of the Year project. So that's a yearly vote for a mascot for bird-friendly Halifax. You can see this year the vote was in for the common nighthawk. So we're using that for engagement post social media. World Migratory Bird Day occurs every year. This year's theme was insects. We partnered with the Woodlawn Library. We had over 50 participants and many volunteers come out. We have the Port of Halifax Waterbird Survey, so surveying for different waterbird species and high-risk sites for oil spills. We also have Operation Window Strike, so I've brought a prop because we've successfully given out 250 of these kits to citizens, and they've equipped their homes with these window strike kits to prevent collisions. So that was great. It was a great project to work on. On top of this, we have Halifax Bird Week. So a lot of you counselors were either in attendance or were invited to come out to these bird walks. It's a great chance to meet your constituents, and it's a great chance for locals to kind of explore their the green space in their district. And if you haven't come out, I highly urge you to come out next year because we want to make it an annual thing. We have the Dalhousie Window Strike Monitoring Project. So Dal Bird Society has taken it upon themselves to walk around campus during the morning and monitor for fatal bird collisions. And we also have the Waterbirds lesson plan, which is for grades 2 to 5. So that's kind of what we've been up to. I want to talk about what's next. So we are looking towards habitat improvement, specifically trying to get bird-friendly plantings, shrubs, demonstration sites within HRM. We want to continue to make Halifax a safe space for birds. So this means assessing threats like habitat loss, as well as predation from roaming cats, and we want to continue with Operation Window Strike as well. We're going to keep engagement running. So like I said, a lot of our projects are going to be annual projects. So we want to keep moving with the Halifax Bird Week, with free public events that people can come out and join. In September, we are sort of facing our certification renewal. So if any of the counselors remember, we just made entry level with a 50% on a report card. So 50% is 50%. That means we're not doing the best. I'm really hopeful that this new renewal is going to look a lot better, and we're going to continue going up in score in the following years. And the final note on what's next, I've circled it. It's bird-friendly building design. So the past year, we've really focused in on this. We've been doing our own research. We've been collaborating with people. And we're working towards creating demonstration sites, different things like that. So from here on out, we're going to be discussing that. So I'm going to pass it over to Amy for the next slide.
Thank you. So what exactly is a window strike? It's not just a bird hitting a window. It's an estimated 3.5 billion birds that travel thousands of kilometers across the Americas through many, many different hazards, only to be stopped by a pane of glass in our cities. Something as hard and reflective as glass is nothing that they would ever naturally encounter in the wild, and they're not equipped to be able to avoid these hazards. There is an estimated 62 million birds that are killed per year in Canada alone by window strikes. That number is much higher in the US, and it's virtually unknown in the Central and South Americas. The image up here that you see, a mosaic of birds that were collected from city streets that were killed by window strikes. And it highlights how high of an impact our cities are having on a taxonomic groups of birds that is in fact declining globally. And our cities are to blame for much of this. Now, has anyone walked into a glass door before? A few of us? Yes. I have also. I just did it last month. Probably most of you walked away unharmed, except for your pride, maybe a little bit embarrassed. But window strikes for birds are a very different experience. So these are small songbirds primarily. They weigh a few grams that are flying long distances, often in the nighttime, early in the morning. And they fly quickly, and they hit this barrier that they would never have expected. It's as if you were driving along the highway at maximum speed, and then suddenly a barrier just appeared. So that's what it feels like to these birds, and fatality is typically over 50%. So if they're flying really fast, they will hit that window head on, and they can die immediately. Also, what happens is they flutter down to the ground, they're injured, they're disoriented, and what do they encounter on the ground? Vehicular traffic, foot traffic, cats, dogs, and natural predators like raccoons and foxes. Now, many birds also migrate at night, and they do so because it's safer for them, it's cooler, but they navigate by the moon and the stars. And so what happens when they approach our cities with all of our lights, they get drawn into this labyrinth of reflective surfaces that they can't seem to escape. And it also may surprise many of you that residential homes and low-rise commercial buildings are also a major, major hazard for birds. So window strikes happen all the time. Some of you might have heard them happening on your own windows in your homes. And if you've heard it once or twice, then likely for sure it's happened more often. You just weren't around to hear or see it. Now, the reason high-rise buildings receive so much attention is because certain buildings can cause mass mortality events, either through a combination of unfriendly bird design or poor placement. For example, directly along a migratory pathway, close to a wetland or a rest stop that birds use. There is one building in New York that was found to kill up to 1,000 birds per night during the migration period, in the spring and in the fall. So birds are essential to functioning ecosystems. They also provide enjoyment to millions of people around the world, and they have an essential right to be protected from harm. So what can we do? Bird-friendly guidelines are a series of recommendations for builders to utilize existing research in ways that will minimize the harm that our buildings have on birds that come through our cities. Examples of elements are reflectivity of windows, so making them less reflective essentially, avoiding high-threat features like glass corners, glass walkways, glass courtyards, basically reducing the amount of glass. Turning off nighttime lights, and using visual markers on windows. Guidelines also look at the placement of buildings, so if they are in a high-impact area, then additional recommendations can be made. And they are usually directed at both new and existing buildings and developments. In the past, we've seen guidelines come out initially as a voluntary set of requirements, and then transitioning into voluntary plus incentive-based. And then once those are comfortably adopted, it's built directly into the building codes. So bird-friendly guidelines are never in conflict with building codes. And we have the Canadian Standards Association, which already has a set of bird-friendly guidelines set out. So we're not starting from the ground up here. Now, Toronto is a great example of a long-time threat to birds, but they have turned this around through a series of initiatives. There's the Toronto Green Standards in 2010, and a series of initiatives called Lights Out Toronto, Best Practices for Bird-Friendly Glass and Effective Lighting. And a lot of cities have followed suit. So Vancouver, Ottawa, Calgary, Winnipeg have also followed suit. Go ahead.
And just as a final note, why would we have this in Halifax? There's the obvious reason to save birds, but planning to reduce impacts from the beginning can mean that it has no impact on building costs and cuts operational costs. On top of this, it's simple, functional, beautiful. There's a wealth of knowledge, and it can contribute to larger municipal initiatives around reducing climate change and biodiversity impacts. Thank you.
Thank you both for the presentation. Truly appreciate it. I do see there's some questions from the committee. First is the Deputy Mayor. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jess, for the presentation. Oops, sorry, I have to move this. So I've enjoyed a couple of bird walks, which is great. Sometimes, though, the leaders have been so good, and they're like, look, in that tree there. And I was like, it's like trying to find a golf ball. Like, I can never find that. I don't even know when it leaves, where it gets out on the green, and I feel the same way about, but each time I go for a bird walk with someone, I'm getting a little bit better at it, which was great. And Councillor Mancini, Chair, I got that app on my phone now too, and my husband says, please keep that in your pocket. Yeah, because I spend more time than trying to figure out on the app, and he just wants to enjoy the walk. So there you go. And the operation, the window strike, your kit, is there a way that they're still available, that people can access them? I know it was a bit of a pilot, I think you said, which is great. So that's my first question. But the second one is, you know, every time that we get reports for development agreements or all of those kind of stuff, there's a section in our report that says, you know, financial concerns and environmental concerns. But you don't always see that if this is a high-rise that's going to be built, you don't always see that, is there an impact? Because we're now a bird-friendly city, then where does that come into play? Is there anything that you would suggest about bringing that to our planning department? Like, how can we make sure that as a bird-friendly city, when we're reading those reports, if there's an environmental concern and it is about the flight path, the migratory path of the birds, or, you know, what is the glass surface that the building's going to use, start to see that in the reports that we get. So, yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks. So to answer your first question, we have passed out most of the kits. I think we have like 15 left, but we're hoping to do the project again next year, so it's just going to continue to build. As for the second question, I think as a city, we really need to start looking into this. Like, first, we need the knowledge base on where these things are occurring, where are high-risk locations near wetlands, near the flyways that birds are striking buildings more often or are more susceptible to a collision. I think starting with the base knowledge and then moving into like voluntary, I think this could be sort of a long process, but I think it's worth it to kind of start that now.
Right.
And see where it takes us. I don't know if you have any comments on the... Yeah, so Hope for Wildlife is on our coalition. Hope is on our coalition with Hope for Wildlife. But she attends our meetings, and I think it was the last meeting, she said that during migration, she is receiving hundreds of injured birds due to window strikes, and like the majority of these are coming from residential. And just to think of that, like that's only the cases that we are finding. So I think she has a lot of data on that, and she has been willing to share it with us in the past as well. So that's helpful.
Great, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Deputy
you, Mr.
Mayor. Councillor Austin?
Thank you for coming in and sharing with us today. I'm just wondering, and you know, I can't recall off the top of my head where we are, because I remember there was some discussion of this when the center plan was being developed, whether or not there was reference that was put into the guidelines around design. I'm just curious, do you happen to know where we are, like in terms of what engagement might have occurred with our planning department? I know we don't control the building code, but whether or not there was if there's been any discussion with our staff.
As for staff, like there is a staff member that sits on our coalition, so we can talk to him, but we haven't had any interaction with the planning department, no.
Mm-hmm. What about regarding our provincial friends with the building code? You know, if you were going to make something like bird-friendly design mandatory, I mean, that's the place to bake it.
Yeah, because we're bird-friendly cities, we're trying to focus on HRM right now and then potentially branch out. So we haven't had any dealings with the province, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for coming in today. Really good to hear about the work that you've been doing. And we'd certainly like to get beyond a pass mark and make more progress on our bird friendliness. Can you talk a little bit about the voluntary standards that have been brought in other cities and what kind of a difference that would make, just to start at the voluntary level as a beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was 2006 when Toronto introduced these guidelines as voluntary. So they started with that, and now they've progressed to like a mix of standards. Other cities that have done this are Ottawa has voluntary guidelines, as well as Vancouver. And then some cities in the US have mandatory guidelines. I think San Francisco does, and Oakland. But what it essentially looks like is, taking this knowledge of high-risk areas and then applying things like window glazing treatments. And think of Halifax Central Library. They have the words on it with the leaves. That was actually put there to prevent birds from hitting the glass, right? So that's a great example in HRM of how this can look. It can look really nice. And then you can also have, like, you know, there's different methods. There's netting, there's other things like that. But.
All right, thank you. I have a motion to bring forward, but I don't know if everyone's finished with the questions, so.
There's nobody else on the list. I do have some questions. If you don't mind, maybe let me
Yes,
ask my
okay.
questions and you can bring the motion forward, if you don't mind. Thank you. So seeing no other people on the list, I do have a few questions. First of all, personally, what's with the red-eyed Vero and the conversations those guys have, man? Outside my home, we have 2 hours of conversation. It's amazing. Are they communicating? Are they just doing their social media in the morning, or are they under threat? What's the deal? It's mind-boggling. See, it's this app. I'm telling you, this app is, it's brought me into a whole new world, and which is good, but it's also driving my family crazy. So that's a serious question. What's the deal with the red-eyed Vero?
To that briefly. So the red-eyed vireo, probably many of you have heard singing. It sounds very similar to an American robin also, so are you sure you're hearing a red-eyed vireo? So migratory songbirds, when they come through, they're just incredibly active. So it's a time when they are marking territory, they're singing for mates, and they're just generally happy as they come through, especially if they have the resources that they need. And the apps that were mentioned are a great way to engage people, because birding as a beginner is a difficult hobby to get into, but the app is just a game changer. You can turn it on and it will identify in real time what birds you are hearing and really hook a lot of people that way. And I just want to comment on Councillor Morris's comment about voluntary guidelines. I can just speak a little bit from personal experience working with the Toronto Wildlife Centre, which accepted all of these birds that were collected in the city of Toronto that hit the windows. And what we did see over time was there were certain buildings that were just really, really high impact, so causing high numbers of fatalities. But after some of these voluntary guidelines were accepted, as Jess was saying, visual markers, they're not the typical decal of a bird silhouette flying. Like, they're beautiful, they're artistic, and they don't impede the view that humans would like to see. Makes a big impact. So when certain buildings apply these, the number of birds that we receive each spring and fall goes down drastically. So even as voluntary guidelines as the beginning piece can make a big impact. And then once that news travels and we can see that we are making positive change, then going on to the next steps is just even better.
Yeah, thank you. So it's interesting. So there's two, as I listened to your presentation, there's two parts. There's the building, when the building's under design and no construction yet, the work to be done. But there's also the buildings that are already, like this building, for example, the work that we can be done. So I do have another question for John again, once again. Would you need direction from us to look at what would that cost to convert our buildings so that we are addressing the building design, the markers? Or is that something you can go on your own, or do you need direction from us to say, hey, go out? And maybe that's what your motion is. I don't know. I haven't seen your motion. So that is your motion. Okay. All right. So I'm getting a nod. But go ahead, John. Sorry if you wanted to.
Sure. Thanks again. Yeah, I think for our city-owned buildings, I don't think we need direction to look at things like window strike kits. I think we've done some of them before, as you referenced the Halifax Library. So happy to take that one away.
Okay, and I think the councillor has something to add to that too, but thank you, John, on that. You know, the comment that I think Councillor Morris brought, or somebody brought forward about the province, even though I know your focus is the city, the province controls the rules, right? So even, I would strongly recommend that you reach out, and if you're looking for someone to reach out to me or one of us here. We can try to help you, assist you on that. But, you know, when it comes to the building code, we don't have any authority or to change that. But they are looking at the building code as we speak now, and so it's maybe from a timing perspective worthwhile because we can address the building code possibly here. So I would encourage you to do that. And I think that's, my last question is, and I'm thinking, should I bring it up or shouldn't I bring it up? You mentioned roaming cats, and I add to that equation fireworks, which is always very delicate conversation for those of us on council. Could you just speak to that and maybe reference our other municipalities or cities around the world have addressed those two things? And how, if they have, how they addressed the fireworks and the roaming cats?
So I'll take the difficult one. Roaming cats is a big issue. I think that is one of the areas where we lost a lot of points, but we do have the trap and release program with the SPCA. Different environmental organizations have tried to bring this forward, but there is a lot of feedback from the public that their cats should be indoors. I think our stance on it is that, we love our cats, but it should maybe be similar to dogs in the sense that they need to be with us and supervised because they are killing millions of birds every year. I'm not sure of exact cities that have bylaws, but there are a few that have bylaws that if a roaming cat is found, it has to be brought in. So that is an option, but I think we are pretty far from that for now. Bird Friendly Halifax has an ongoing project on an app where people are taking photos of the outdoor cats in their neighborhood, and then they post it online and say, it's kind of cute because there's like a bunch of cute cats on there, but they post it online. They say this not wild cat, but this outdoor cat was seen in my neighborhood. So that kind of gives us an idea of where these different pockets of outdoor cats are. So we're starting with that.
And the fireworks piece?
Yeah, I can add to that. So in terms of fireworks, we have been seeing movement across many municipalities to move towards less disruptive forms of celebration. So for example, the drone show that we actually had here in Halifax on the Dartmouth side, which was really exciting to see. And this is not just in recognition of how disruptive fireworks can be to wildlife, but also just neurodivergent individuals. Pet dogs certainly suffer a lot during fireworks seasons. But fortunately, when we generally hold fireworks, it's not during the peak of migration period. Certainly we have biodiversity all around us all the time, and less things exploding in the sky is always a good thing. But I think the direction we're moving towards, in terms of these drone shows, which are quite popular now, is a good direction to go.
Thank you both. Councillor, you have a motion?
Thank you, and I just want to mention to the committee that I had a few discussions with Jess about building standards and some of the challenges of waiting or trying to get changes in the building standards given how difficult it is even to make energy efficiency changes and that sort of thing. So we talked about what we could do at HRM without kind of going that route, and that's why I'm going to present this motion related to voluntary standards and a staff report. So I move that Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee direct the CAO to prepare a staff report and recommendations for voluntary and mandatory bird-friendly design standards for new and existing buildings, including a jurisdictional scan examining bird-friendly design standards from other Canadian municipalities and cities.
Second by the Deputy Mayor and colleagues. That motion is on the screen now, if you want to take a look at it. Go ahead, Councillor.
So I think this would at least be a beginning for HRM, and it may influence the Red Book design standards at some point, but we need to kind of start to see what we could do at a voluntary level that would be effective based on the work that's coming forward from Dalhousie and other organizations, other cities. Every time a city signs on to bird-friendly initiatives, we're learning more about what can be done. But I think given the context here in HRM, where we're challenged on our building standards and the timeline for those to be changed, I think this would be a good first step. So I ask for your support on the motion.
Seeing no questions, we have, you just waited for me to say that, did you? And then he chimed in. Go ahead, Councillor, it's all yours. Floor is yours.
It's just a procedural question. So we're not waiving notice of motion, but we are taking a motion from the floor, which none of the councillors have seen before, except for this moment. So just checking to ensure that we didn't need to waive that notice of motion. So where it's a committee, perhaps that's not an issue.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Since this is a motion coming from a presentation, we don't need notice of motion.
And the solicitor just confirmed that
Yeah.
too. So look, everyone's it agrees.
No, I appreciate that. It's just from time to time, it's like, oh, there's no notice of motion. Why is there no notice of motion? So I appreciate the motion, happy to support it, and just kind of geeked out on procedure for a second there. Thank you.
Yep. Seeing no questions, we'll call for the question. Question's been called for. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. And there's no one opposed, so that motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor. To both of you, thank you very much. And thank you for hanging out in Dartmouth. Anytime you want to hang out in Dartmouth, give me a call. You know I'm there to hang out, right? Thank you, folks, for the work you do. Sorry? That's right. I need someone to talk about birds because my family won't, so that's right. Yeah. Thank you both. Great. We had two presentations. We have action from both those presentations. That's great. That's really appreciated. All right. Now comes time for the part of the meeting where we offer to the public to participate. They can come forward and speak on any topic they wish. So, well, there's no one registered to speak. I'll leave it to anyone who wishes to speak to the committee. You're welcome to do so. Just raise your hand or step forward. I'll call 3 times. Anybody else wish to speak? Last time, anybody wish to speak? We have no speakers, so that's the end of the public participation. No information reports are brought forward. We're now into reports 13.1. These are the staff reports. First one up is 13.1.1, existing and planned measures for coastal management. And does someone want to bring that forward? Who would like to put that on the floor? Deputy Mayor, thank you.
That for you, Mr. Chair. The motion is that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee forward the staff report dated June 14th, 2024 to Regional Council as an information report.
Do we have a seconder? Second by Councillor Morris. Deputy Mayor? Nothing? Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Lovelace, you have the floor.
Another procedural question. So we are going to forward this as an information report, not as a presentation, though it's pretty hefty. There's a lot of content in here, a lot of information. So I'm just wondering if I guess at this point, it's going to go to council. Council's going to request that it come forward as a presentation potentially, because I know I would like to have a presentation on this. So it's coming to our committee not with a staff presentation, so I'm trying to understand why. This is very, very important work, and knowing the changes that we've seen recently with the Coastal Protection Act, you know, I guess I will just say I'm disappointed that we don't have a presentation on this today.
Let's see if we can get a response from staff on that. Shannon, did you want to come forward? Or, you know, look, they're all standing up. What a team, right? Other departments know when they're all looking at each other. This one, everybody gets up. That's awesome.
There are also 3 Shannons here, so you're going to have to differentiate. Shannon Miedema, Director of Environment and Climate Change. Nice to see you all. Mr. Chair, we only typically unless the practices change, give presentations if they're requested, or sometimes if we feel really strongly that it would be best to have a presentation, we suggest it, and it gets determined by like through the agenda planning process for regional council or through the chair of any standing committee.
Okay, so I'm just going to put a pitch then to our deputy mayor that regional council actually request, agenda committee request a presentation so that we can get at this meat, or else we're just delaying the conversation for, we don't have that many council meetings left, Mr. Chair. So anyway, I appreciate that, but certainly this is deserving of a presentation. Thank you.
Okay, and I see Deputy Mayor noting that. Since Deputy Mayor does attend the agenda review for regional council, she'll note that. So good. Seeing no other questions, we'll have a call for the question. Question's been called for. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Anyone opposed? That's been carried. Thank you very much. Shannon's. All right, next we have 13.1.2 Municipal Watershed Management Framework. Would someone like to put that on the floor, please? Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council, 1, endorse the draft framework for integrated watershed management as set on attachment A of the staff report dated May 29th, 2024. 2, direct the Chief Administrative Officer to direct staff to implement the steps outlined in the framework for integrated watershed management in the Dartmouth Lakes watershed and return to Council with a completed watershed management plan for approval. And 3, direct the Chief Administrative Officer to direct staff to implement the steps outlined in the framework for integrated watershed management in the 9 Mile River watershed and return to Council with completed watershed management plans for approval.
Second by Councillor Lovelace. So before I turn it over to you, Councillor, I believe there is a presentation. Speaking of presentations, they weren't going to do it, but they figured they'll do it now. I'm just kidding. They're all ready with this presentation. So why don't we do the presentation, and then Councillor Oslo, I'll give you your opportunity to ask your questions. So the floor is yours. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Chair and Councillors. I'm Elizabeth Montgomery. I'm the Water Resources Specialist on the Environment and Climate Change team. I'm here today to talk about a framework for integrated watershed management, but just before I start, I want to acknowledge I certainly didn't do this work on my own. There was a lot of help from a lot of folks, many of whom were volunteers. So I just want to thank them before we get started. So thank you to all those people who participated. So why would we do integrated watershed management in HRM? Great question. So we need a strategy for managing aquatic ecosystems in the municipality, which are increasingly under pressure as we grow. Some of the concerns that we see in our watersheds are increasing water quality and quantity concerns. So concerns with water quality include, but are certainly not limited to, increasing chloride and phosphorus concentrations in lakes, frequent sedimentation events, increasing instances of blue-green algae, invasive species, and bacteria, decreasing oxygen in the bottom of our lake while they're stratified, and issues with stormwater disposal. Some of the issues we see with water quantity in HRM are more frequent drought and flooding events, so extreme water levels at both ends of the spectrum, and also issues with potable water supply for folks who aren't serviced by municipal utilities. We also need a long-term vision for how we manage these land units. The issues that we're seeing in our watersheds stem from systemic problems, and so they need a coordinated solution. However, we have a lot of watersheds, and they're all different, so while we want a coordinated approach, one size will not fit all. There's also competing interests for use in many of our watersheds. So different interest groups expect to access water resources in different ways, and economic and environmental concerns are often framed in opposition, but they certainly don't need to be. This work aligns with many other municipal strategic plans that have already been enacted or are in front of you in the coming weeks. So it aligns with Halifax, the program that my team is working to deliver. Actions 13, 14, 20, 21, 23, 25, 26, and 34 are all related to managing water resources, economic protection and resilience, ecosystem protection and resilience, and working with communities. It aligns with the Halifax Green Network Plan, which aims to protect blue and green spaces. Aquatic corridors are often used by aquatic and terrestrial species, and objectives that are good for managing water quality can also benefit those species and the health of the wildlife corridors. It aligns with the Integrated Mobility Plan, which aims to get people out of cars and into public and active transit. I'm sure you've noticed when you're driving along that a lot of our roads are really, really close to waterways, and so of course they have impacts. Section 2.4 of the current regional plan encourages watershed planning and states that, and I quote, environmental features such as water, soils, vegetation, and habitat are all interconnected. And finally, the proposed updates to the regional plans specify that we do this work specifically. This is a map that our wonderful mapping team has put together for me, showing all the watersheds in our municipality. What is a watershed? It's an area of land where all the water drains to one lake or river system. Apart from shore direct watersheds, which are shown in dark green on this map, and where water flows directly over land to the ocean, there are 46 watersheds at the secondary level in HRM, which is a lot to manage. They are all different, and like communities, what works in one won't necessarily work in another. So we have to take a unique approach in each of these areas. So what is integrated watershed management? How do we take care of these watersheds? We proposed using an integrated watershed management approach as outlined in the draft framework that was attached to the staff report that you have. This approach is used by other successful watershed managers in Nova Scotia and in Canada. This list includes, but again, isn't limited to, Ontario's conservation authorities, the town of Kentville, the Clean Annapolis River Project, and the Alberta Lake Management Society. What does it do? It sets long-term goals for the watershed. Our current approach is pretty responsive, and so it's hard to solve systemic problems that way. It also sets measurable goals and metrics for program evaluation, so we can tell if we're doing a good job or not. It also involves folks from all active key interest groups in the watershed. That it has many benefits. First of all, the people who know the watershed best are directly involved in the planning, and their input is heard right up front. And as many values and potential conflicts and issues that are facing the watershed are also identified up front, so you're not encountering things when you already have a basically completed plan. The style of decision-making is based on evidence and done by consensus, which is a little different than how things often work in a government context. So for basing decisions on evidence, we are in our third year of collecting data through our Lake Watchers program. So even at a municipal level, we know a lot more about a lot more of our lakes than we have even 5 years ago, and we want to be able to use that data to make decisions. Reaching consensus can take more time, like I said, but it will add value later if policy changes are sought. Knowing that there's broad support for the policy changes, and while not everyone may be happy with consensus, everyone is satisfied, it will be more easy to implement changes that may need to be sought later. And this approach is heavily stressed in other places where this work is done, that this is the best way that folks have found to move forward. It will develop a watershed management plan for the watershed where it is being enacted. The guiding plan, this is the guiding document for watershed management, and will set out goals and potential funding mechanisms for the work that needs to be done. This work may include policy changes that would come to council the regular way, but it also could include proposals for monitoring, restoration, conservation, access, or economic goals that aren't necessarily through council, but are more community-led. It will also lay out a mechanism for program evaluation to recommend changes when those management plans are brought forward to council. So you'll see those when we're finished with them. And finally, it supports community-based stewardship. We're really fortunate in HRM that there's a lot of folks who are doing this work, again, often as volunteers already in their spare time. And they are often the folks doing the most and the highest quality work in the HRM. And so we want to support them in this work where they're already active, and we can help cultivate this type of community participation in areas where it doesn't exist already. This work would be led by a steering committee. This group represents the diverse interests that are in place in a watershed and could include, but this list is again not limited, Indigenous communities, recreation associations, municipal staff, developers, and environmental stewardship groups. This is not a committee or advisory board operated through the clerk's office. It's a lot more ad hoc and focus driven. Their terms of reference will be only for the duration of the pilot project that we have proposed in the staff report. And once the plan is finalized, the manage will be undertaken by a different implementation team, as it will be proposed to council when we come back with the plan. Members of the steering committee will develop the watershed plan together and will work to do larger community engagement as they go. Once complete, the municipal staff will bring the watershed management plan to council for endorsement and with a funding proposal. To guide the development of the watershed plan, we propose to hire an external facilitator so municipal staff can participate without being perceived to drive the program, so we're able to really hear the diverse interests of folks on the steering committee. The budget details are in the staff report in front of you, but the cost of this can be accommodated in ECC's current operating budget. Oh no. Okay. We proposed 2 pilot watersheds where we can try out the implementation of the framework. We propose that they'll be at the secondary watershed level. That represents generally like a large land area, so it's not so small that we have to manage hundreds of watersheds individually, but it's also not so large that too many interests are grouped into one plan and it becomes unworkable. We chose the pilots to represent a broad spectrum of land uses, ecosystems, and density, and we're looking in one watershed that is more rural and one watershed that is more urban to just try and capture the most challenges that we can in the pilot stage. We also attempted to coordinate with other municipal projects to make use of work and data that has already been collected or is ongoing. And we propose that the pilot project will take 2 years from the time that the work starts. So the first watershed that we propose to pilot the framework in is Dartmouth Lakes, which includes Lake Micmac and Lake Bannock in downtown Dartmouth. It's heavily urbanized with heavy recreation use. Part of the reason we chose this is that a management plan was already requested and presented to Regional Council. And while some project progress has been made on that management plan, many of the actions are complete. It represents a great opportunity for us to reevaluate that management plan, take what we feel is working from it, and reorient in places where we may need to, given that this was 5 years ago that this was done. And we want to make sure that all uses in the watershed will be represented. So, there's lots of municipal parks, lots of there's a trail system, there's a municipal beach, there's all kinds of international paddling that happens there, as you know. And to that end, there's a lot of municipal projects proposed in the next few years around the lake. So there's Parks is developing a coordination plan for their park system around the lake. There's upgrades to infrastructure in the watershed as well. So we feel to capitalize on the previously done work and the work that's coming, this is a good watershed for us to try our framework out as we expect to encounter a lot of challenges. The more rural watershed that we've proposed is the 9 Mile River watershed. Some of it is within the urban service boundary and some of it is quite rural. So again, it's going to offer a bunch of different challenges in one watershed. There is some future development proposed, but the principal reason that we've proposed this watershed as well is we've done a lot of scientific study there in the last year or so through our natural asset initiative, our work with the Natural Assets Initiative, which is valuing the ecosystem services provided by natural features in the watershed, which they consider as assets for the purposes of this study. This work includes proposed management actions to maintain the services already being provided in the watershed, and also involved a lot of baseline environmental data collection through the entire watershed. So this project and the results of the Natural Asset Initiative's work will help, again, form the basis of a watershed plan, so we're not starting from scratch, because the 2-year duration of the pilot project will mean that we'll have to work quickly, so we want to capitalize on work that's already been done. What can you expect when we're finished with the pilot phase? So we will be bringing completed watershed management plans for both of the pilot watersheds. So again, the Nanaimo River watershed and the Dartmouth Lakes watershed. Also, we've proposed the framework in front of you as a draft because we expect things are going to need to change as we actually work through the process. And so we'll be bringing a finalized version of that, having worked through the process, identifying the pain points, and hopefully resolving them. And then we will make recommendations on the next steps, like where are we going to take this next, what is the best case for the next watershed that we want to implement this framework in, and we will propose a prioritization matrix for how this will be rolled out, because of course 46 if we only do 2 a year, we'll need to prioritize where we start. And that is the end of my presentation, so thank you very much for your time.
Elizabeth, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm looking at the list. I'm sure there's lots of questions. Councillor Lovelace, you may go first.
I think he was first.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry, I've been looking at the list and I jumped ahead. That was just a test to see if you guys were paying attention, so you're very good. Councillor Ostraw, my apologies, sir. And Pam, want to come back on the board? Yep. You messed everything up. I know. It's par usual for me to mess things up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Elizabeth, to you and everyone in Environment who has been working on these. When I read this report last night, it was like, this is exactly what we need. That was my reaction, because having pushed for a bunch of action around Banook, it at times has felt very ad hoc. In terms of, we got the report, we did a couple specific projects in terms of going after, trying to chase down where cross connections might be in Halifax water, putting the netting up on the bridge to get the pigeons out of the roost, and the little pilot rain garden off Prince Albert Road, and all those are good things. But there was never really a kind of a broader plan, and sometimes it felt like, well, geez, if I wasn't nagging on these things, would they have actually proceeded, right? So I think that this is exactly what we need. And then on the flip side, out in the community, besides just our now, in the process of being folded up Watershed Advisory Board, which wasn't a great structure to work with, there's a lot of community interest. They're trying to organize right now a kind of a Dartmouth Lakes sort of group and what that would look like. So I think this is very timely. I think it's very much needed. I think it feeds in a lot of different ways. The one question I had when I was looking through the report, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit there, so once the steering committee is set up, I don't think a plan will have that kind of buy-in from the community writ large, even if the community is not part of that steering committee. Do we anticipate that the steering committee would hold some open houses, public engagement type things? Because I think unless the broad, I get the point of a steering committee to drive the project, but unless the broader community has a chance to have some feedback, input into it, I worry that the thing won't go anywhere. So is that something we expect?
Yes. Based on work where this is done in other places, like the recommendation is to keep the steering committee small-ish, just so it's like possible for folks to work together. But I think like at the outset, the plans again that are well done tend to be very clear about like how community engagement is going to happen up front and like when people will have a time to weigh in. Whether that's led by the steering committee or directed by the steering committee and led by HRM staff, I think will depend on how the steering committee wants to work. But yeah, the goal would be to gather information right up front so folks can identify what they perceive the issues to be, and then again when we have something to show for it.
Okay, that sounds good. I mean, I think having some public involvement writ large is really important. When I think about the Watershed Advisory Board and, the decision to get rid of that, this steering committee model sounds exactly like what a lot of the folks that I had talked to on the Watershed Board had imagined what their role would be from the get-go. So I think this is really good work, and I'm very excited for where this is going to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next is Catherine. No, I'm just kidding. Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Yay! We did it. I think it was, 2 years ago that Minister Stephen Guilbeault was here. We were talking about 9 Mile Watershed and how are we going to save this. So awesome. It's great to see this. You know, Acadia First Nation, Spekanakitic, Sackville Rivers, 5 Bridges, Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes, like all, I'm just looking at the expansiveness of this. And then you've got the shell fishing industry that's been shut down in Shad Bay. And so, plus the straight pipes, but we won't go there. But, you know, there's a lot of moving parts here to be able to bring all this together. And I think this next iteration of that advisory committee, you know, steering committee, which is what we need. We need all those people who are, you know, engaged in some way on the peripheries, but also directly, you know, the people who have been contributing to the Lake Watchers. Just amazing, and more people want to get involved the more they hear about it, which is wonderful. It is a large land mass that we're looking at when I look at, and I'm focused on 9 Mile River because, you know, these areas in particular used to have salmon. In the industrial fishing in Shad Bay, for example. But what I'm concerned about is we're going to do all this work, and the province is going to benefit from this greatly. A lot of this property is their crown land, and so or federal property. But how do we ensure, like Alberta wrote this in legislation, that municipal watershed management is in legislation. So what can we do? You know, I feel like we're going to spend the next 2 years doing all this great work, and then we're going to showcase this great work, but we still don't have that legislative authority that we need in order to protect the watersheds. So I feel like I'm maybe putting you on the hot seat, Elizabeth, but you know, this continues to be that problem that we're up against. And when I was in Alberta, this was what they were saying. They weren't able to successfully protect and conserve and preserve these waterways, wetlands, and so on and so forth, because they didn't have the authority. So it wasn't until they actually got the authority that things changed. So what's your viewpoint there? How do we actually move this needle forward to get that authority?
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair to you. Great question. I think, you know, we are, that is like a limitation of this work being done at a municipal level for sure. Like we will have the ability to change our policies on like our own land, on municipal land, and the goal is to engage with the province throughout the process to try and move that along internally. But, you know, we as municipal staff don't have a lot of control over provincial policy. And so I think, you know, one of the things that may come back with the recommendations when the work finishes is like how best to engage that. But I also think speaking about the need for it is helpful as well. Mm-hmm. And we do work with provincial staff and like have been supported by provincial staff on this work. So I think there is an opportunity to continue that conversation like at a staff level and also, you know, at a more public level of how to get that done. But I think, you know, we aren't going to be looking to make recommendations, like binding recommendations on like provincial roads, for example. Right. Like there may be recommendations that come back to council or come through the community group to advocate for that work like formally at the province. But we'll be looking at like what can we do in the with the legislative framework that we have now, and then what do we need to be advocating for to improve, to support that.
And so this work, is that going to tie into the groundwater study that's being done, and is it going to tie into some of that stormwater work that Halifax Water is doing? Because the groundwater is a significant issue in this area. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about is it doesn't encompass all of the future national urban park.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So we work with the folks who are working on both of those projects all the time. And so like we're in coordination, like the groundwater piece, of course, groundwater recharge is something that could be focused on by through this watershed plan. I feel like I sound like I'm hedging a bit, but I just don't want to be too prescriptive going into it, like what the watershed plan will look like, because we really want to hear from the folks that are there to make sure that we're representing all their interests. But we're working as much as we can in coordination with other plans. Like the groundwater study that's happening, as I understand it, will inform the rural plan. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's possible, like we'll be making recommendations for bylaw changes or inclusions for items in the rural plan through this work as well. Like we are open to that mechanism, I guess. So, if the work if there's items found through the groundwater study that could be incorporated into a watershed plan, we would certainly be open to that as well. And same thing with stormwater. Like in other places where this work is being done, a lot of the recommendations they have are for like small, prioritized areas for restoration, and a lot of the
Micro approach.
exactly, yeah. And so a lot of the time that would be like small projects for stormwater management. But again, I don't want to say what these plans are going to look like without having done the consultation.
But it's on your radar, and why didn't we look
Councillor,
at?
can I get you to come back? I'm sorry.
Oh,
Would you
sorry,
mind-
that was my question.
Sorry, but
Now,
just
sure.
come back again if you don't mind. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Morse, for this motion that started all of this and seconded by Councillor Lovelace. Thanks, Elizabeth, for the presentation. I remember when this first came up, and I was like, the same thing as Councillor Austin. It's like, yay, this is what we need. And while it says that it can be done within the current budget, and it looks like that's $25,000 per year, but you're going to be hiring a facilitator, I guess I'm just a little concerned that that budget is sufficient for what needs to happen. So that's just one thing. And I guess the other is, who is going to be on the committee, right? I know we talk about the partners and all that kind of stuff, but kind of interesting that where you will look to find the community partners, will they only come from the 2 pilot sites, or will you look beyond that? And I guess I'm thinking about, I sit on the Collins Park Watershed Advisory Committee, and I know the expertise that is in that room and around the table, and it's, voluntary participation, but they're an amazing, dedicated group of people. And they wouldn't like me very much if I didn't say, could we add 3? Could the Collins Park Watershed be involved in that in some way? And how could they be involved, even if it was a mirror to what's going to happen with the pilot? I really appreciate the urban and the rural pilots and completely understand the rationale about why they were chosen. So, that's great. And the other thing, I guess I wonder sometimes, what is the risk of us not moving this as quickly as we can? When I think about a lot of the stuff that's happening in the watershed in the Collins Park area and the development that's happening and how are we protecting our watersheds, I just worry about we shouldn't be passive in this project, right? It's something that's really important. And just from the report, I wanted to say that I really appreciated Attachment B. To see how that was laid out, I thought that was just a really nice piece of work, and thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the councillor. Thanks, councillor. Thanks for the comments on the report. And I guess to answer your first one, the budget, that's the budget for the facilitation. There will be budget asks, probably on a much larger scale, when we come back with the completed plan to actually do the work. We just don't have an idea of what that work will look like without having developed the plan, I guess, to answer your first question. So that is the budget for the facilitation, and then the rest of the work will come out of staff time. To involve like technical experts, I guess, and specifically the Collins Park Advisory Board. We have, I guess, yes and no, like technical experts can be involved. So the way, like on the steering committee for that participation, from the research that I've done, like in other jurisdictions, it does seem important to have that limited to folks in the watershed. But that doesn't mean that there is not an opportunity to consult technical experts in other places. And so there'll be, like, that will be a parallel process, right? Like once the broad issues in the watershed are defined, there's like many opportunities to bring folks in who really know how to do this, either locally or, partners in other places. So there's definitely an opportunity for technical expertise outside of the watershed, but for the steering committee where we're trying to get like input on a watershed specifically, I don't know that it would be super useful, I guess, or workable to add too many other folks on. But, as far as the work that the Collins Park Watershed Advisory Board does, they're in a unique situation because that's a watershed advisory board for like a protected water area for drinking water. So they have requirements that they have to meet, and I think like we can learn a lot from the work that is being done in source water protection in HRM already, and maybe the management goals aren't as stringent because not all the watersheds that we're looking at are water supplies, but the principles apply, right? So I think there's certainly room for participation as technical expertise. As far as adding that to our pilot, I think they're pretty, that's a Halifax Water question. And as far as the risk to not moving forward, I mean, I think the main risk there is that we continue with a piecemeal approach. I don't want to oversell this as the silver bullet. Like, it's going to be difficult, there's going to be gaps, but it's going to be better than what we have currently when we're finished. And so I think, you know, the main risk to moving forward would be we continue to do things the way that we do them. We have, you know, the watershed plans that we have do, like I said, tend to be responsive and typically at the request of councillors, which isn't bad. It's just harder to have like a holistic, well thought out management framework for an entire watershed when it's just kind of like whack-a-mole. And so this would help us prioritize and just have a more streamlined approach, which I think will be better long-term. But, you know, it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything in other watersheds in the meantime. You know, our team's work will still be ongoing. But yeah, I think the risk would be not having a strategic way to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Elizabeth. This is, and Emma, it's a huge amount of work that you've done here. Originally talking about starting with Carney Lake because I was familiar with it. I had hoped for a systemic approach, but I didn't think you would take on something of this scale, but it's certainly needed in order to address some of the issues that are happening with our lakes. And I think to pick up on the risk, we risk losing some lakes for recreation if they become too polluted, if we, you know, have algae or other issues that, you know, make them impossible for people to enjoy, and they're such a valuable resource. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the complexity of this, because here we have almost 50 watersheds in HRM. That's a lot. And then we I think you said 1,000 lakes we have roughly. So we can't go at this one at a time. We have to come up with a systemic approach. But then we have a regulatory context that is not very supportive of taking a systemic approach. So I wonder if you could just say a little bit about that. And I think maybe if you could give us an example that I was familiar with, that you had said that we have a lot of roads right next to lakes. And the one I'm familiar with, Carney Lake, we have 4 or 5 pipes that go from one side of the road. The drainage then goes right back into the lake, taking the salt with it and other pollutants right back into the lake. So what can we do on those, in a lot of situations that we have where stormwater is running back into the lake and taking pollutants with it? What can we do through this systemic approach to address that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to the councillor. Okay, I'll answer your first question first, I guess. So as far as operating in a regulatory framework, I mean, I don't want to, I guess something I maybe glossed over in the presentation, but there are groups already doing a version of this work in HRM now, right? Like the work of the Sackville Rivers Association, you know, for example, they're not the only ones, but, you know, they've restored a lot of that river themselves as, you know, a largely volunteer organization. And I think, like, you know, in arguably a more hostile regulatory environment when they started than what we have now. And so I think, you know, just because we don't have specific direction from the province doesn't mean that we can't do at least parts of this work and make improvements. So I hope that answers your first question. And then the second question, as far as stormwater, that is, as I understand it, policy now for stormwater to discharge directly to the nearest surface water body. That was best practice in the past. A lot of other provinces have moved past that now. We haven't yet. And I think like stormwater is a challenging piece in HRM for sure. You know, we have a lot of lakes that have stormwater discharging directly to them, not to mention the harbor. I think, you know, a policy, which is outside the scope of, you know, the municipality to not discharge that stormwater directly to lake, to surface water bodies would be great. Another thing that we can do, though, at a municipal level where we have a little more control is on municipal land, maybe end-of-pipe solutions to capture and treat stormwater before it makes it into the lake.
So more filtration, I guess, and
Allowing for filtration and infiltration and retention. And I guess to Councillor Lovelace's question as well, that's another thing that we can look at.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we go the second time around, I'd like to make a few comments, if I may, from the chair. I have no questions, but, it's interesting. Someone told me the other day there's an election coming up. I had forgotten about that. But, many of us around the council chambers here are reflecting on the past 4 years of accomplishment and looking forward at what's going to happen in the next 4 years. This type of work is at the top of the list for me, and I think many of our colleagues around this room. This is a really important work, and this is the work that we should be doing for our municipality. We talked about, the province will benefit. I think Councillor Lovelace said about this. Sure, certainly, but a wise man once said, imagine what we can accomplish if we don't care who gets the credit. I mean, this is just simply important work, and I thank you, Elizabeth Shannon, and your entire team for this type of work. Councillor Morris, I thank you for bringing the original motion forward. I also thank you for, I think your 2 pilot sites are perfect, right? The 9 Mile River, the complexity and the size of that. And for Councillor Austin and I, the City of Lakes, you know what town that's in, right? That's Dartmouth, and it makes sure. And I'm not surprised your earlier comment about folks stepping up and wanting to get involved, because there's passion around the people that either live around our lakes or our watersheds. They understand the importance of it. The Lake Watchers program, no problem getting volunteers. I mean, you probably even had to turn people away. So, I mean, this is amazing. This is such an important work, and I just thank you. So I don't have any questions. I just think as we reflect on the past 4 years and as we move forward, this is definitely the top of the list. So thanks to everyone. Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you. I was just asking about the National Urban Park and the inclusion of the entire watershed. While I understand that this is looking at kind of the western end of 9 Mile River, I'm just wondering what kind of, there is a big portion from Cox Lake down, so Fraser's Lake obviously is extremely important, but just wondering what those deliberations look like as far as the exclusion of the other lakes in the national, soon hopefully to be National Urban Park.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to the councillor. Thanks, councillor. I mean, the boundaries are geographic, I guess, is how we chose the boundary. Is like it's a drainage boundary, I guess. So we're looking at where is the limits of that watershed boundary and sticking into it, just because there's a lot of, there's similar complications, I think, with the Dartmouth Lakes watershed, where like technically it's connected to the canal system.
Yeah.
And that artificial connection, like that wouldn't be a natural drainage pattern. So we do have to just end it somewhere.
At some point.
And because we're looking at watershed management, we want to look at like the geographic boundary, but that doesn't mean like we won't be working with the folks in parks who are working on that National Urban Park, and any, benefit to one section can benefit the whole park as well. I guess I know that's not necessarily satisfactory answer.
Well, no, but I think it is really important because people will want to know. So I can appreciate that. At some point we have to cut it off. But obviously when we think about the wetlands throughout that, especially to the east of Fraser's Lake, it's pretty important. But thank you for that. I appreciate the work, and I just am so happy we made it to this point. So good job.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And follow-up question, actually in the same space as Councillor Lovelace, is just on the boundaries of the ones that are there. And it's kind of actually the reverse. And Paul almost thought, like, well, don't go ask a dumb question like that. Penhorn Lake flows, my understanding is it goes Morris and then, out the river there, out to Eastern Passage. And Maynard is piped into, the drainage of Maynard is into pipes that then goes down Newcastle, and actually right now goes to the treatment plant. Hopefully in time will be separated and we'll just go directly to the harbor. Where those two don't go into, at least to my knowledge, I might be about to be corrected, maybe there's connections here I'm not aware of, where they don't go into Banook, Micmac, into that kind of chain, why are they part of the potential watershed? Not that I mind attention on them.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. I think that's a quirk of the mapping. Those lakes are technically shore direct, like you said, and I think we can limit or expand the scope of that based on what the steering committee is interested, because they are, like, there is overland flow around the Penhorn area that does end up in Lake Banook. So I think the primary focus will be on the watershed itself, but where those ones don't necessarily fall into a watershed, we may be able to extrapolate some of the management that's going on around Banook and Micmac into those other lakes, but they won't be under primary consideration.
Okay, that makes sense. It would also be a bit of a weird outcome to do planning that involves Oat Hill Lake in the middle of the three, because Oat Hill goes that way and then the other two don't. That would be a bit of a kind of a strange just kind of outcome in terms of community where I would anticipate we might have education campaigns, these kinds of things that are going to be applicable to all three. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. In the work that you did compiling this, I think you were doing some scans of best practices across the country. Can you tell us a little bit about how we compare with other provinces in terms of our watershed protection? And I'm wondering if you would see a value in the committee or a regional council requesting some changes, like making a formal request to the province, like in the next few months as the pilot is being done, because we know other times when council has requested legislative changes from the province, it can take years. So I'm wondering if there would be value in starting that request now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, thank you. Yeah, there probably is a value in starting that work now. I think you can expect some recommendations to that effect as the Lake Watchers report comes forward as well, which will be in front of you soon. But I think, yeah, there's work to be done. It could start sooner. Sorry, did you have a second question? I started to write it down. I forgot.
No, it was just in terms of who's ahead of us and what we can learn from Alberta or some of the other jurisdictions.
Thank you. I need to learn from Lacey, who did the first presentation. No, I think, I think the way that this is handled in other places is ahead of us in some ways. You could look at the Conservation Authority approach that they have in Ontario, where there's like mandate and fully separate bodies who are doing this same kind of watershed management work. I don't think that we expect to attain that level of service with this project, but and then you also have in Alberta they're mandated to do this kind of work, but it's more devolved to organizations that are focused in a specific watershed that are less legislatively enabled. And there's also in many other provinces there's also more stringent guidelines around stormwater. So I think in those ways we are not a leader, but in other ways we are. There's a lot of really grassroots community work being done that's been going on here for decades, and that is really building the groundwork that got us to the place that we are now, and we can build on that community support to implement these plans. And I don't know that exists everywhere. You don't see like the volume of community organizations in other places that we do here, and that speaks to our people. It speaks to the number of lakes that we have that people have easy access to, which is unique as well. And it speaks to the good appetite for this kind of work as well, I think.
Absolutely. It's just such important work that you're doing here, but we need to support the volunteers and any effort to protect our water, because prevention is so important. It's very difficult to remediate. So we need to do everything we can on the prevention side. But thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other names on the board, we'll have someone call for the question. The question has been called for. All those in favor? And no one's opposed. That motion is carried. Once again, Elizabeth, the entire team behind you, thank you so much for this work. We look forward to as we progress with the pilot. Next up on the agenda, let's see here. Motions, there are none. There's nothing in camera. There's no added items. There's no notice of motions, I don't believe. Seeing none. The next date, if necessary, is September the 5th, so we could have someone call for adjournment. Councillor Lovelace, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.